everyone, it's Robin, RsIslandCrafts. Welcome to my studio. Today I wanted to talk about bobbins, sewing machine bobbins to be specific. I thought we could talk about storing bobbins, how you wind your bobbins, where you purchase your bobbins, and anything else we can think of that is related to bobbins. I love bobbins, and I love to have lots of bobbins. I'm not one that likes to stop in the middle of a project to have to wind another bobbin, especially if it's white thread or some type of neutral. I use a lot of a silver gray. I use a lot of browns, blacks, and whites, and I just don't see the point for me to have one white bobbin when I'm going to be sewing an entire quilt together or working on several projects. So let me show you some of my bobbins that are already wound up. Before we get all into this, let me just show you what a bobbin looks like before it's wound up. Now, because I like to have so many bobbins of various colors, I don't want to stop and constantly wind thread, especially if I only have one spool of that color. Then I have to take it off my sewing machine to wind it, put it back on, blah, blah, blah. You know, all of that necessary things. But I buy my bobbins on Amazon. I have a very basic bobbin. Both my Juki and my brother have no problem using just this basic simple bobbin. I don't know what it is. The number that comes to mind is like a J15 or something. I don't know. Check your sewing machine manual and it'll tell you exactly what you need. But the last time I bought bobbins, I believe I bought 100 of them. Now this container is from the Dollar Tree. It is supposed to be able to put berries or cucumbers or something along those lines in there, and then you put the lid on and you can store it in the refrigerator and all the excess liquid or juices drip down and your cucumbers are supposed to stay fresh longer. It doesn't work. I have 4 of these in 4 different colors, and I didn't want to just recycle them or throw them away or donate them, so I thought, well, let me keep them in my sewing room and I'll find a use for them. I keep this in my main desk drawer where I keep all of my bobbins and such, and this is all of my empty ones. So that's a great way to keep them contained. Now I have been sewing for many years, and I have bobbins from when I first started sewing. I've noticed for mine that they tend to get yellow and they get a little brittle. So when I use up one of my older bobbins, I put it in this little handmade basket that I've made. As you can see, there's other fun goodies in here too. But I know that when I put one of these in, now this one might be one of the newer ones, you can almost see how there's a different color to them. But this one has a bunch of scratches on it, so that's probably why it's in here. I know when my bobbins get really old, they end up getting brittle, and these pieces along the edge, the outer lips here, they just break off, and then I end up throwing away all the thread because it just gets to be a mess and it's not worth saving. So anything that looks a little scratched up, or if there's a chip in it, or if it's getting a different color, I put it in here. Now you may ask, why am I saving them? I don't know, maybe there's going to come a craft project that I might want to do. Now I've been throwing away all my spools of thread, and now I wish I hadn't because I've seen so many fun projects that use those. So I'm saving them because maybe I can find a fun craft room project or a Christmas project. These are all bobbins that I've wound myself, but you can also purchase pre-wound bobbins. They come in a variety of colors. I was writing the weights on these because these are an 80 weight while the rest of my other ones are a 50 weight. But since they go back into this container, they are a polyester thread. I like to use these for a variety of projects, and I think it's great once I found out that you can put a bobbin in the top of your machine where your sewing spool thread goes and a bobbin in the bottom. How cool is that? So now I can just use 2 of these and put them one in the top, one in the bottom. And it's great to have a pre-wound bobbin because they have so much more thread on it, and it's put in such a nice even way that they can put more on than I can get on. So you may wonder, why do I have all of these containers? This is the very first one I purchased, probably from like Joann's or Walmart or something. The problem I have with this, as you can see, this is for embroidery with the sewing machine. The bobbins don't stay wound very well and they become messy. I do have some pre-wound bobbins that were shared with me down here. I don't know if they are 100% cotton or polyester. They look like they have some polyester in it, so I keep it here. And I keep things that I'm not sure of separate, because if I'm working on a bowl cozy that goes in the microwave, I want to make sure I have 100% cotton thread so I don't take any chances. These bobbins were given to me. They go with a project. Oh, it's all taped closed. They go with a project that I have for some Hawaiian quilt blocks that I have. These are the matching threads that were given to me, so I did not separate these at all. I left them in this container. It's just the same thing as this one here. It's just completely clear. It has the same situation where everything is a mess. When I first started sewing, I had a bunch of Coats & Clark and Walmart brand threads that I used. I was just starting out. You start out with whatever you can find until you know what works better for you. So I've been using those for various crafting projects when I'm making, maybe I'm making some crumb blocks, or I'm working on some mug rugs or fabric postcards. It's great for that because while the thread is amazing, there's nothing wrong with it. It's not very old at all. It's still good to use. I might not want to put it in maybe one of my tote bags or a quilt or something like that. So I keep them separate in here, and I also label them as not 100% cotton because I'm not really sure what's in all of them. And if there's a mixture, then I want to make sure, again, I keep it separate. But my favorite is these donuts. They have bobbin boats that are just a rectangular one, like a small ice cream tray that has an area. If you were to take this, chop this off and straighten it up. So that's basically what it looks like, just straight. So you could put just one color in. So maybe you want to put all your red in one of those boats and then all your green in another. That works out really well if you're like me and you have a variety of shades of the same color. Now, I don't mind not having my bobbins connected to my thread. When we talk about thread in another video, I will show you how I handle those. I do have another type of thread that I keep in the sewing room here, and I keep my bobbins attached. I know all of these are essential threads. This one is kept in a separate container because I was given a set of essential threads that are just small little bobbins of threads, little spools of thread, and they're a little bit of a different color. So I just keep them in this one since I had an extra one, so I know if I pull it from that container to look in here. Otherwise, I just take the spool of thread and I take the bobbin and I lay the thread on top, and if it matches, then I know it's it. As long as it's similar in color, I'll use two different color orange threads. I don't mind if the bobbin has a different color than the top thread. That doesn't bother me at all. As long as the tension's working out really good, it does fine. This I keep as my neutrals though, because I want to be able to fill these up. I don't have a lot in here right now. I do need to spend a little time winding a bunch of bobbins, and I'll show you how I do that in just a moment. So I do keep my silvers over here, and then I keep my grays over there. So my shades of gray I have in different places because I have 1, 2, 3, and 4. So I want to keep them separated, but I do like to have at least 2 of the same bobbin. I have plenty to use, so I keep going. Now, some people will say not to use these cheap bobbins from Amazon, and that's totally up to you, and it depends on your sewing machine and what it likes. As I mentioned, my machines have no problem with this. If one of these out of the 100 I bought is broken, it's a little, if I notice that it's a little flimsy or it's cracked, I'll just throw it away. There's 100 of them. If a couple of them are oopsies, it doesn't matter. Generally, when you buy things like this in bulk, they give you 5 or 10 extra. So if any break along the way, then you're good to go. Now, as you can see, these stay inside, even though they're not super tight in there, they're loose. So even though they'll move around just a little bit in here, there's that little lip on the top edges on both sides to keep it inside. The threads don't really come unwound, just a little bit there, and usually it's because of the way I put it in. But most of them, as you can see, they're not just a big mess. And when they do, I can just go ahead and spin them around, and it'll just go ahead, pull them out, wind it up, spin it when it's on the inside, depending on where it's located and how tight it's in there, it will wind itself up. So that works out really great for me. Plus, I really love this green color. I think these are a little bit older and more original. This one is very soft and flexible, while this one is just a little bit firmer. This is called the Bobbin Saver. And this one doesn't have a name. So either way, they work out really great. So no matter how you're going to store them, we need to have our bobbins. So let me show you how I wind mine up. When I first started sewing, I did learn how to wind my bobbin on my sewing machine. I had a Singer sewing machine back then. And then I purchased a new Brother machine, so I started winding my bobbins on that. My daughter knew I wasn't thrilled with having to always stop to put a spool on and off and to wind the bobbins constantly. She saw my frustration, so she purchased a side winder for me, the portable bobbin winder. Now this can be run off of batteries. I've never used batteries for it, but I guess if you're taking it to a quilt retreat or something along those lines, maybe you're in a quilting group or you're doing some type of a sewing with people for charity or something like that. I always use mine with the electrical cord that it comes with. Just plugs right into the back and runs off your basic electricity. So this was purchased for me for Christmas of 2008, and now it's 2022. So I've had this for 14 years. I did have a little bit of a scare a couple years ago. I thought it stopped working, but just had a little hang up in here where it had a piece of thread or something stuck inside this little spindle that stopped it from winding up the bobbins. Now you may notice I have some washi tape up here. This is holding a piece of felt that normally sits down here. And I guess it keeps the spool from sitting nicely and not wobbling everywhere, but it's all worn out. I saved it in case I wanted to trace it out or something like that. But most of the spools nowadays come with various things, and it gets in the way and I don't use it. Now, as I said, I've been using this sidewinder for many, many years, and I absolutely love it. I use it all the time. It gets pulled out constantly. I keep it on an open shelf nearby. It never gets buried. I love it. Now, you asked 10 other quilters about it if they've had one or used one at someone's house or something, and half of them may love it and half of them may not like it at all. You can get a different answer from everybody. But it works perfectly fine for me. I've never had any problems with it. We all know sometimes we buy things and we might get a dud that needs to be returned to get something new. My daughter paid $25 for this back in 2008. And the last time I looked a couple years ago, it was still $25. So it hasn't gone up in price. I guess it's held its value pretty good. I consider it one of my necessary tools here in the sewing room. So it has a little spindle that comes up and down so that when you go to close it, you can, and then you can put your sewing spool on. I also use this when I have a giant cone of thread. It does not fit on here, a cone. You have to put it next to it in like a mason jar and just let it wind up that way, but you can wind this and you can wind the cone. This is a spool from Essential Threads. They have this little cap thing on the bottom. It is used to hold the thread as far as I know. I don't know if it does anything else, but when I put it on my winder here, it's supposed to wind from the back. I've never tried it from the front. I always just flip it over, remove the little cap, and let it wind this way. So you put it through this little eye hook there, and it goes through that, and then you put your bobbin on here. It has two little spots here that you can keep your bobbins on if you have extra ones, whether they're empty or full. I don't have a need for that, but I guess it would work if you're going to a quilt retreat or something. So the end of the thread goes through one of the holes. It goes on here. Now I hold on to the end of the thread, and when I turn the machine on, it's going to spin really quick. So I find that it gets really quite wobbly. So I usually put my finger there. So I put this little notch over and it holds that so it spins the bobbin and loads it up evenly. And I just hold it down and then I click go. See, if I let go, it's not really flat on the surface. The weight of the spool makes it wobble. It doesn't bother me. I just hold it down It is a little loud, but it doesn't even bother the cats at all, so that's not a problem. Cut my thread, and then I find there's that piece of thread that I was holding. Sometimes a spool itself might be a little bit ornery, and the thread might pop out or it gets wound underneath or something, but for the most part I've never had a problem with it. Pop it back on. You see how it just holds that end nicely so it doesn't come undone and leave you thread everywhere. So you can put these on here if you want to store them on there. I, of course, like to keep them in my little bobbin donuts. This is one of my most favorite tools that I use all the time, that I would choose if I were to pack up and go and hang out with someone at a quilt retreat. This is something that I would take with me. To be honest, I would have to take my manual to know how to use the bobbin winder on my new sewing machines. I've never wound a bobbin on my machine on the Juki or on the Brother. I know some sewing machines are much easier to wind the bobbin on the machine, but I've really gotten used to this and I love my little side winder. So your scrappy word for today is bobbin. So are you like me, and do you like to have several bobbins of the same color, or do you just wind a bobbin as you're working on a project and you don't have a lot extra sitting over in any type of a storage system? Do you have a sidewinder? Are you like me, and do you love it, or is this something you've never tried? I do recommend that before you purchase something like this, $25 is a high amount of money to be purchasing for a tool that you don't know if you like it or not. I am willing to spend $5 or $10 to test something out, but once it gets up above that and stuff, I like to try it somewhere else, or at least hear from several people that I know that they have used it and it works well for them. So if you're not sure because you hear me say I love it and then you hear other people say they're not a big fan of it, maybe you can see if a friend has one that you can go over to their house and try it out, or sometimes they will have them at the quilt guilds or other people at the quilt retreat. Sometimes quilt stores will have them so that you can try them out. And that goes with any type of tool, not just with the little bobbin winder. So thanks for hanging out with me, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!